morning, everybody, and welcome to this panel, and a very special good morning to my fellow panelists. There are 6 of us, and we've just bargained for 1 hour. So I'm going to request all the panelists to maybe just restrict your comments to about 7 minutes, which means we'll cover 45 minutes with each of you, and then possibly have 15 minutes for open house, both with the audience as well as amongst ourselves, in case anybody wants to, So I'm going to take the first 2 minutes to use this platform to actually share one big idea. As many of you know, with the global political trade dynamics that's happening, the Honorable Prime Minister has called a meeting of key economic ministers as well as leading economists, think tanks, chambers of commerce to craft out a new set of energetic initiatives to galvanize the growth of the Indian economy. Obviously, one of them is infrastructure sector. And in infrastructure sector, the point I want to make before you is that the last 2 decades have seen 2 major programs that have led to a complete transformation of the Indian economy. One is the Roads and Highways program, and the other is the Renewables Trust. They have attracted investments, they have created jobs, and have created a completely new set of industries that have had tremendous effect on the GDP growth of the country. The question now is that both of them have reached a certain level of ongoing tempo, a stage of maturity, and sustainable operations. And the question before the Indian economy is, what is the next big idea? And I submit before you that after a lot of deliberation at our own think tank, which is the Infravision Foundation, we've come to the conclusion, and that has been published in the Business Standard edit page today in my column, that the next big idea is actually high-speed rail, which has the power and the potential to be the next big transformative idea after roads and highways and renewables. The bullet train project, which is a single standalone project, is at a high end, and high-speed rail falls between roughly what you would call the Vande Bharat speed and the bullet train speed. It fits into the middle, like many European trains and others that you're familiar with. The bullet train project costs about 2 lakh crores at today's prices, and the simple proposition is that 7 new corridors that have been identified by the Rail Ministry and others of approximately 700 kilometers each, if given shape as a robust national program called the High Speed Rail National Program, has the capacity to galvanize for the next 15 years a minimum of 20 lakh crores of fresh infrastructure activity. With the well-known multiple of 3 that infrastructure projects deliver, the turbocharging impact of 20 lakh crores of investment over the next 3 years will be close to 60 lakh crores. It is, after roads and renewables, it is the next big transformational idea in infrastructure. I wanted to use this forum to share this thought with you. Many would agree, many would disagree, but this is certainly something worth discussing, not just at today's panel, but in taking the idea forward. Now, I'd just like to move on to the panel discussion. And what I have requested my fellow panelists before we met at the panel is that I'm going to have a very standard template so that we effectively use the 7 minutes that each of us have to basically talk about 3 areas. Number 1, what measures do you think are required to get more private capital, domestic and foreign, to invest in India's infra development? That's question number 1. Question number 2, which are the top 3 governance reforms required to make infra utilities work better? And the last and third question, could you share 3 learnings from your own career as an infrastructure professional? Trust these 3 should be sufficient to get an energetic discussion going. So let's get cracking with the panel. I am actually going to ask our guest from overseas, Mr. Nicolas Schenk, Chief Development Officer of the Noida Jewar International Airport, to kickstart the discussions. You could feel free to speak from wherever you're sitting. I don't think you need to come up, and I'll join you there. Okay, all the best. Thank you.
Good. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me here on this panel. It is a delight to be here, and I feel very honored among such a group and such an audience to be able to present and talk about our Noida International Airport, which the organization I represent today. I think it's an important infrastructure for the NCR, this new airport, this second airport in the NCR, but it's also a very important infrastructure for the whole country, for India overall. And I feel it's also a very great success for the overall infrastructure business environment that it is done through us, Zurich Airport, as an international group, as a foreign direct investment, which to one of the questions you just mentioned, what is needed within this infrastructure environment to get more private capital, domestic or foreign, into India's development. And I think here, what is very important, and we were lucky enough already back in the early 2000 years to be involved in the Bangalore International Airport, to see a huge change in the overall business approach. And one important foundation is an overall vision as a government, as a country. There's a clear vision, where do we want to go, where do we want to grow. This is this $30 trillion economy in 2047, which I believe drives a lot, brings then the policies, because policies at the end, strong policies, are the foundation for infrastructure development. You need to have certainty that your investment is within strong policies. In these policies, of course, an important aspect is the overall risk allocation. If such investments are taken up, what are the risks taken up by the private investor? What are the risks taken up by the public? And then, of course, a very important part is the overall income or revenue stream, which needs to be governed by a strong regulator, where here in India, in the aviation business, with the ERA as the regulator who defines the tariffs, I believe we have a very strong regulator who takes this up in the best way for all involved parties. In addition to that, you have the concession agreements, which do form the foundation of all of these investments, which need to define the risks in the private in these concessions of such private-public partnership investments. I think we have seen, and as we are investing in various airports across the world, we were able to witness on our own that India has developed a very strong foundation when it comes to these concession agreements. These are top standard and really taking up the concerns of the private investors. There are regulated definitions on cost overruns, these mechanisms for recovery if it is not attributable to the investor. I would like to mention here, for example, land acquisition, which is always a big risk in these kind of projects. And in our project at the Noida International Airport, we were very fortunate that I think within a record time, this land was acquired, handed over to us, so that we were able to invest. And I think this is really shows that strong commitment. Then, of course, it needs to be bankable. All these projects and the foundation or the framework around of it, it needs to be bankable so that the investors, domestic or from abroad, take this up and actually find proper financing models. This is heavily linked to the duration of the concession and again to the revenue share models, where also here I feel in our case of the Noida Airport, we do have a very important or a very good framework supporting the business and at the end supporting the whole region and supporting the public to develop such a large infrastructure. If we talk about governance reforms, what would be required overall, I believe what we see as well is, and what I very much like, is this initiative around this Gati Shakti, which should bring these different ministries together on a common table to develop integrated development plans. Because infrastructure as airports cannot be developed in isolations. It needs landside accessibility, it needs connectivity, it needs support when it comes to rail integration, expressway integration. It needs support when it comes to supply of water and power, but as well all the policies governs on the air side to handle aircrafts. And I think here we are very fortunate in our airport project that from the government of UP, from the authorities in Lucknow, as well as the local authorities, the YEDA and NIAL sitting in Greater Noida are very supportive, very professional, getting us the support we need to have such an integrated development approach. And I think what is a very important aspect when we talk about the title, or coming also to some of the personal experiences, it is the title of this session, From Project Output to Outcomes, and I think this is very important, that it's not about the amount of concrete gone into a runway or the amount of concrete gone into a terminal building. It's kind of the outcome, what is planned, what is looked for, what is needed for a region. And having that in an integrated way depicted in an overall development plans, regional development plans, where all these different modes of transportation, also in your initial 2 minutes input of these high-speed railways, all of these modes of transportation should not be looked at in isolation, but rather in an integrated way to add up to each other. Only then it is beneficial for the people who are at the end the users of it, and we just facilitate them to have as much ease in their way of mobility moving to A to B. And I think what is very important when we look at outcomes is the overall economical aspects of such infrastructure investments or infrastructure developments. It's the overall job creation in a region. It is the business opportunities, the ecosystem which gets built up in and around an airport, and the social impact it has on enhanced tourism inflow, as well as on the improved urban infrastructure, be it schools, hospitalities, which you can see being developed in such a region. And therefore, I believe, to close with, we are very lucky to be in Greater Noida, the chosen party to develop this airport in collaboration with the government of UP, where we have made very good experience and are on a path to a very successful implementation of our first phase of the airport.
Thank you, Nicolas. That was a lot of insights in your speech, and I would particularly like to comment that since the core infrastructure sector was opened up to 100% FDI, that you came in, Zurich came in and participated in a competitive bid, and in that fully transparent process, you won the concession for the airport. It's always very heartening for a country to see FDI come into core infrastructure. And so thank you very much for your insights, very, very valuable. And since you've been very appreciative of the very supportive policy framework, hand-holding and linkages provided by the Uttar Pradesh government, I suppose it's only natural to have the next panelist as, yes, please go. Mr. Awanish Awasthi, advisor to the Chief Minister Uttar Pradesh, and you are taking over from a very positive stage setting by Nicolas.
Thank you. And we look forward to the Zurich Airport supported Jewar Airport to come up somewhere around the end of October. And if you are stuck in Delhi, you could go to Jewar straight, take a flight off to Geneva or some such place. And I'm sure this is a possibility in the next 3 months. Thank you. Thank you, ET Now. Thank you, Infra Focus. Thank you, all the partners for this entire conference here today. I got a call that, well, I should be here. It was tough, but I'm so very happy to be part of this. There are 3 or 4 things that we have been able to do in our state, and I'm purely giving you the state perspective. The first thing, which is most important, is that there has to be a vision for the leader of the state. And I can say this for sure. The vision for Jewar Airport came from our Chief Minister. This project was lingering for the last 17 years. And I was part of the industry department where this project was envisaged way back in 97, 98. But nothing really came out of it. It is only in Yogi Ji's government this entire thing was taken up. And the very first thing that our friend has said is availability of land. So my first thing for any infrastructure project is land. If the state is not able to provide land for any project, that is where almost all government projects get stuck. I'll give you a small example. Our Chief Minister in the 19 Kumbh asked us to go there. He asked me to prepare a 2-page note on getting a Ganga Expressway. This is the largest public-private partnership project in North India. It's about 45,000 crores. And he said, just don't tell anyone, just take a 2-page note. We had the cabinet there in Prayagraj, in Allahabad. And in the cabinet, he got it passed, 45,000 crores of project. And while we were coming back from Prayagraj in the helicopter, I asked him, sir, ये बनेगा कैसे? 45,000 करोड़ आएगा कहाँ से? And he said, this is what you have to find out. ये तुम जानो कैसे होगा. And the very first thing I told him was that unless and until we have land for any road project, we will not have partners for our project. The next day, he provided 3,500 crores of rupees for the land purchase for this project. The other half, he allowed us to securitize one of our existing road infrastructure, the Agra-Lucknow Expressway. 5,000 crores we got from PNB. The Honorable Finance Minister herself came over to Lucknow to give our check, and this 7,500 crores, which was available one time, was what allowed us to get within 6 months the entire land from Meerut to Prayagraj. And today, I'm very happy to tell you, we have been part of this project. Almost 94% of this project is complete. Any time after November, December, we will have a road starting from Meerut to Prayagraj. So the first thing which is most important for the government to do is to provide land for projects. I've been in the power sector for very long, about 9 years, and I've been associated with large power sector projects. If you are building a power sector project, then of course the power plant itself does not create a problem. But the right of way for the power lines becomes a state job. And anyone who's here in the transmission area would realize that how tough it is to get land across the entire state for the power sector. So the first thing which is required to be done for taking projects forward is land. The second aspect which I would like to tell you is capital. I am of this view that it is absolutely easy to get capital within the country. I was asked to provide for this public-private partnership. We came out with an expression of interest. A Saudi fund came to us. Any number of people came to us. Somebody suggested Asian Development Bank. Somebody suggested World Bank. We said that, well, these things would take us 1 year. So we went to the public sector nationalized banks. All of them came together within, for our other projects, within 2 months, all the banks got together, made a consortia, and they were providing us all the loan possible with support, of course, of the government. We have done 80,000 crores of expressways in our state. We have the largest expressway network in our state. And incidentally, the subject of today's discussion is reassessing infrastructure impact from project output to project outcomes. So this is the point where I wanted to make. If we hadn't had the expressways with us, the 29 industrial areas which are coming along the expressways wouldn't have happened. If we didn't have the expressways with us, during COVID, when every aircraft travel was stopped, we couldn't have movement within our state. If we didn't have the expressways with us, during Kumbh and for tourism, we couldn't have provided with the large movement of cars and buses from all across India, which came for Kumbh. 66 crore people came to Kumbh, and this was only possible through the expressways. My point is, ultimately, this infrastructure has a multiplier effect on the state. The state has to look for land. State has to provide governance support through what is called a single window. Most states have a single window, but that doesn't really actually operate on the ground. You have to run around all over the place. So that is another challenge that we have. But the point which is most important is that ultimately it is the state which always has to provide its share of money. Most of the states now do not have money with them to provide for capital. And I'm so very happy to tell you, we in Uttar Pradesh have the largest budget of the country of any state, which is about 8,10,000 crores. And out of this, 2 lakh crores is for capital, which is ultimately for infrastructure. And this is where UP is now moving forward, not just in the road infrastructure, in the airways infrastructure, in medical infrastructure, in education infrastructure, as well as in the infrastructure for the metro projects, as well as for the RRTS and other projects. I would also like to state finally that, well, 3 learnings. One, project monitoring has to be very strong, and the government should have the commitment to move forward fast. As our friend has just now told, I was part of the entire process where the Chief Minister negotiated with the farmers directly, and he decided, well, this is going to be the amount of compensation to be given for land, and it was done within the next cabinet. It was approved. The farmers were happy, everyone was happy, and the land for the Jewar Airport was possible to be given. So this is a major area where a lot of work needs to be done for providing for land for projects. There are any number of interest groups which create problems for the state. And these interest groups have to be properly challenged. These interest groups go to the courts at times and create problems in the public domain. So this is what we need to take a call upon. I would finally say that, well, the expressways of our states, you had spoken about high-speed rail. I've just been to Japan for green hydrogen. We want to get into this place. I have retired as the power secretary of the state, and we are very much part of the renewable solar as well as CBG. We are now the largest state producing CBG. My only point is we should not go for very high cost infrastructure like the high-speed rail, but we should think about the semi-high-speed rails, and we initiated a project that along the expressways with the right of way, if you can build semi-high-speed trains, then the cost of the project becomes less than half. So these are the things I would like to state. Thank you, ET Now. Thank you, Infrafocus, for having called me here. We have worked extensively in this area of infrastructure. I continue to be the chairman of the $1 trillion economy project for our state. We will reach 1 trillion, and Modi ji has given the target of 30 trillion. So 20% of that is 6 trillion. So we in Uttar Pradesh have to reach 6 trillion by 2047. Viksit UP, Viksit Bharat. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Awasthi. That was a very inspiring speech. And it is certainly very, very true that from all infra watchers that UP has made giant strides in project conceptualization and in implementation. So congratulations to you, your colleagues, and your political establishment. So I think it's path-breaking. And we just got reassurance from a foreign investor also that they're happy with all that's happening. It is my pleasure to introduce the next panelist, Mr. Suresh Goyal. I have known Suresh now for over 2 decades, in his earlier innings in Macquarie, and then in his extremely illustrious innings as the head of the InVits of NHAI. You know, from Prime Minister to the Finance Minister, there is always a talk of monetizing assets which have been built with taxpayer money. So public expenditure creates projects, and the National Monetization Plan says that we get private capital to come and pick up these assets. And while many departments have struggled to meet their monetization targets, Suresh has very, very ably shown how monetization can be achieved through this instrument called InVits, and he ran it, mobilized funds, and I believe it is a historic high that NHAI had mobilized, if I remember the figure correctly, about 1,50,000 crores of InVits. Yeah, overall, of which a substantial amount was actually handled by you. So here is the expert on monetizing brownfield operating assets. Over to you, Suresh.
Thank you. And thank you, ET Infra, for inviting me for this conference. And I must also compliment you for being imaginative and inviting BRO to lead the organization, because we tend to forget in our roads and airports and the highways, etc., that part of infrastructure is super critical for the country. Let me take a different perspective to that. Since the theme of the topic, theme for the session is project outcomes leading to project outputs leading to project outcomes. With your permission, I would like to focus on two aspects of this. One is related to the society, right? And the second one is related to the financing, which is what I know. Just picking up the second one first, which is related to the financing bit, is that all our aspirations to grow the country by building infrastructure can only be made possible if we have adequate financing supporting that. We tend to forget that for each kilometer of highway, for each new airport, for each expressway, for each high-speed rail, there are requirements not in millions of dollars, but billions of dollars that need to stand behind it for that to get completed. And let's also not forget that we are a poor country. So for us to be able to continue to invest into infrastructure, we need to find alternate means of financing. Really, kudos to you, Awasthi, and to the state government for having put the state forward to ensure that, the infrastructure get built. But the fact is that capital that has been put in by the state is only available in, not in abundance, if I may say so, right? So you are prioritizing building the infrastructure, hoping that the trickle-down mechanism of that infrastructure then will go down to the poor people in the country. But why don't we also look at that there are pools of capital that are available, both domestically and internationally, and I completely agree with Awasthi again that there is a lot of capital that's available in the country. And I'll give you two points of view here. Number one is that we know that the global savings are on a historical high, and particularly I'm not talking about the FPIs, I'm talking about the pension fund, insurance companies, including from your country, Nicolas. And they are looking for investments, and India does emerge as a shining place when that capital has to come in. I'll give you one point example, which is pension plan, which is the Canadian pension plan, currently has about $600 billion assets under management. By 2030, they will be hitting, it's on their website, they will be hitting about $750 billion. And lo and behold, by 2050, they expect to have assets of $2.5 trillion that they need to invest. They cannot invest in Canada, they have to look of investing in other countries, and that's why they are investing in such a large number in India, and there are so many others that would need to invest. And we need to be able to find ways to channelize that capital into India. That capital is not coming as debt, that capital would come in as risk capital, just like Zurich brought in risk capital into this country. And that capital, once it comes, stays for a much longer period and thereby adds to our own economic output. That's on one side. On the other side, our own pension monies, insurance monies have not been going into infrastructure. It is something that we all should, and certainly using the platform of ET Now and ET Infra, to ensure that we begin to have those conversations. Our pensioners' money also need to come into our own infra, because if a foreign pensioner can enjoy the benefit of supernormal return out of the Indian infra, why should our pensioner not be allowed to do that? And our pension monies currently are in double decimal digits, Just to give you by comparison again, globally, most pension funds or insurance companies or sovereign wealth funds allocate about 10 to 15% to emerging markets, and within that, then another 10 to 15% of their own capital. So if you were to just take 10 to 15% of our own pension monies, insurance companies over a period of time to come into the Indian infrastructure, we would not be then looking at the taxpayer and allocating capital from the poor people to come into the infrastructure, but we can dip into these resources to build our infrastructure. So that's the impact that we can have in accelerating our infrastructure growth. That's on one side. The second point is, despite we talking about investing into infrastructure, we are just running on the treadmill at the same speed. I'll give you one data point, which is that while we have invested about 7 trillion in last 9 years, we'll invest 7 trillion more in the next 6 years. That's what the government plan is. But our investment as a percentage of GDP continues to hover between 30 to 32%. So we are not really accelerating in infrastructure investment. Just by comparison, China consistently for the last 20 years has been investing 40% plus. So the point that the chairman GNPA was making, that they were at 25 million TEUs and they're going to go to 200 million TEUs in 25 years. But that also would require that kind of investment to come through. That basically would mean that as a percentage of GDP, we need to up our investment. And for that, if you go back to the previous point, that we need to dip into the pools of capital so that we can reduce the cost of capital and make the investment. And just to your point, you mentioned about that your idea is about that we should invest in high-speed rail. I have a contrarian view, which is to say, if semi-high-speed, yeah, semi-high-speed, and I will go completely the other side. I just want to bring some dispute also in the forum. Our cities are dying, right? We don't talk about infrastructure, the urban infrastructure, the logistics, the urban transportation, etc. Why we love to go to Europe? You know, the country that he comes from has some of the best urban infrastructure in the world. Most of Europe has it. We don't have it. We need to invest into that. If 60% of Indian GDP is services, and the fastest growing centers of GDP growth are the urban centers, that means we need to invest into those. That means we need to have local transport. We need to have buses, we need to have metros, we need to invest into those. On these forums, we end up talking about large infrastructure, but the urban infrastructure is equally important for us to grow. And it got triggered only by the point that you made. I'm sure we need both, but I think we should talk about it. Thank you.
Yeah, I love this debate because I've been having this high-speed rail debate for some time now, and there is a seminal study which says that across countries that have invested in high-speed rail, the real economic growth actually happens from the cities on the intermediate route. Like in Delhi, in Ahmedabad, Mumbai, there are intermediate cities like Surat, Baroda, Navsari, etc. And those cities tend to grow in terms of GDP higher than cities which are not on a high-speed rail route. So this debate goes on, and I know the priorities in this country, where do you put your money? There are different points of view, and I'm sure we will coalesce somewhere. But thank you, and once again, very high recognition for the work you have done in monetizing NHAI assets. I think that will go down in India's economic history, and you will certainly not only get a footnote, but you should get a chapter also. But anyway, now coming back again to the discussion on private capital, I'm now going to invite Mr. Abhishek Chaudhary, CEO of Welspun Enterprises. Now here is a company that has traditionally not been in infrastructure, but has moved into infrastructure in a big way. And I think among the many successful projects that they have done and are doing, any of you who are traveling towards Rishikesh, and even Hardwar and that side, today see the speed and comfort of the Meerut Expressway, right? And that's been done by Welspun. So I could give a longer introduction, but I thought that would resonate with people in the north. So over to you, Abhishek.
Thank you so much. Yes, that was the first hybrid annuity project which was rolled out by NHAI, and Welspun was associated with that project, completed the project ahead of schedule. And at that point in time, there was a doubt in the minds of the Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable Minister for Roads and Transport, कि एक टॉवल बनाने वाली कंपनी को आपने रोड बनाने का काम दे दिया. So we took it as a challenge. We delivered it with the highest standards of quality and much before the time. So I'll just go with what Mr. Chatterjee has given us a brief and try to be restrictive in the interest of time and focus my discussions on basically three broad heads. One relating to the financing, second relating to the reforms, and the third relating to the learnings. So I'll be very, very brief. Financing, as we all know, that as per the latest reports of NITI Aayog and World Bank, we will as a country be needing around $4.5 trillion for creation of the infrastructure by 2030. At the same time, I would like to say and agree with what Awasthi sir was mentioning. There is no dearth of capital availability. There is dearth of, I think, well-structured projects. There's dearth of projects which are completely de-risked from the perspective of land acquisition, from the perspective of local hindrances, from the perspective of project preparatory activities with regard to your clearances from the point of view of the environment, your tree cutting permissions, your permissions for ROB from the railways, and so on and so forth. So I think there is no dearth of capital availability in the country right now. And the work which Mr. Goyal has done in the past, that has opened up a completely new area of raising capital, of inviting private sector to contribute to this whole mission. But we all need to understand and appreciate the point that over-dependence on the budgetary allocation of resources or over-dependence on the bank-based financing for the infrastructure projects, I think with this, we will not be able to carry forward our journey and the speed with which our country wants to move in this sector. It's very important that new areas or the new sectors where there is an untapped capital, he mentioned about the Canadian pension funds, I completely agree with that. The insurance, the pension funds, which is sitting on a corpus of more than 100 lakh crore, that needs to be tapped in. And over-reliance on the budgetary allocations and the bank financing needs to go away because that's untapped capital where there is a very limited amount of return they are making. That can be pulled in by use of relevant tools and the relevant instruments, which is one of them has already been rolled out, which is InVits. Yes, there is a lot of instruments which are coming up, whether it is REITs, whether it is InVits, whether it is municipal bonds, green bonds, etc., but all needs to play a very vital role in taking this forward. What we need to understand is for doing that, there are certain limitations to my mind. One, the credit rating of most of the infrastructure companies and their ability to issue bonds. The balance sheet strength of the municipalities, whether they will be in a position to raise capital on the basis of their balance sheet, all goes hand in hand. Because at the end of the day, whosoever is investing capital is not doing charity. They are expecting a reasonable amount of return, may not be an exorbitant return, but a reasonable amount of return, which will get backed with the financial strength or the balance sheet strength of the organization raising the bond. He spoke about the urban infrastructure, and I think the government has now started giving cognizance to that, and that's the reason why this Urban Challenge Fund was announced as part of the budget this year. Now, coming to the reforms part of it, I think, to my mind, the reforms relating to the integration of the utilities, reforms from the perspective of building in technology, building in more and more robust methods of project management, and reforms relating to the accountability to enhance efficiency as well as the sustainability of the infrastructure which we are creating, I think is very much important. We also need to decentralize the complete management of the utilities, which to my mind is at present centralized in some form or the other. Rationalizing of the tariffs and the performance incentives for the purpose of creation, operation, and the maintenance of the utilities is another reform area where I think we all collectively need to work on. One thing which I think we all understand at the back end, but we hardly acknowledge it, the growth trajectory which we are targeting, it's very important that we have to create the capability from an execution standpoint. the number of infrastructure companies, good infrastructure companies available in the country right now, whether they will be able to take the load of the total volume of work which we are planning to execute as a country, I'm saying, is questionable, and we need to develop that capacity in-house. Last but not the least, the learnings. I think huge investments on planning of infrastructure projects rather than starting and executing the project in a hush-hush. Adopting a Japanese model of investing more than 60% time on project preparatory activities and taking a lesser time on the execution. De-risking and the mitigation of the project, or I'll say mid-course connection of the project rather than waiting for a conciliation or an arbitration mechanism to unfold at the end. So whenever the problem is arising or anything is mushrooming, just handle then and there and have a system of mid-course connection as part of your agreements, contracts, concession agreements, etc., etc. And last but not the least, I think there is because I have seen both sides of the table, from the government side when I worked earlier and now from the private side, I think there needs a mindset change still, whereby a relationship of government versus contractor or client versus contractor, we all are the stakeholders, we both need each other, without which I think this infrastructure story cannot move ahead the way we want it to. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Abhishek. That was crisp, and I think your many lessons, particularly the one about investing time and effort in planning and solving problems midway rather than allowing them to fester, will resonate with anybody in Indian infrastructure. So thank you very much. I am now going to ask another private sector player, Mr. Shailendra Tripathi of Kalpataru Projects. Kalpataru is one of the very fast-growing and impactful EPC companies, also part developer, to share his thoughts with us this morning. Thank you.
Yeah. Hello. Am I audible? Yeah. So, thank you, ET Infra, and yeah. So, I have the opportunity of speaking the last, and you have heard the infra thinkers, you have heard the infra administrators, and I think I come from the core EPC part of the infra, and I will be definitely not talking something very which will bring core happiness and which will bring some truths about the infra sector. Right? Sorry, Vinayakji, I'll be taking this opportunity because I've been looking for such occasions, right? So if you look at the infra sector today, we have about the national average that we have about 458 projects monitored by PMO. They have a 62% cost overrun and about 35 months of time overrun. What that it speaks of about as a country about the infrastructure building, right? I fully agree with Mr. Goyal and Vinayakji. And I have seen last 30, 40 years of journey. I think money was never a big issue when it comes to the getting the money and implementing the project. The biggest issue has happened the way the infrastructure projects, the time and cost overruns have gone through the roof. And as the topic was very, very relevant to at this stage of the nation development, that yes, we have done the certain things in last 20 years to do the infra development. Can we do different now? And I fully agree that forums like this, we must come out with the solution that what really can be done in terms to address this. We have some of the very bright examples of successful outcome measured projects like DMRC. But then we have a Mumbai monorail, which has exactly the contrast. We have the Konkan Railway, saw a 4 times cost overrun and about 15 years of delay. But then we see some of the DMRC implementations, which are, it tells only that in the pockets, we have the capability, which need to be synergized at a country level. And if you ask me what are the top 3 reasons why we are in this shape of project delays and the cost overrun, top of my mind there are 3 reasons. The reason number 1 is the poor planning. Reason number 2 is the poor planning, and number 3 is the poor planning. And with this, Vinayak has given me a limited time. I think we are closer to that time. But I think what really need to be done, this was the problem side of it, but solution side, I can say that government need to come out a big reform on the land side. If you see the project, why they are delayed, mainly because of the land acquisition. All projects you take, whether it is urban transport or connectivity or highways, most of the time overruns are related to the land acquisition. Can government something do about it in terms of the policy reform? I think this is one issue, Vinayak, we should take up collectively. And the second is there is no regulator for this sector, construction sector. There was some discussion a few years back. It was discussed in the various forums. We have a regulator for certain sectors. We have seen that some shift and some vibrancy in those areas, like you see the telecom or the electricity. Those sectors have reformed and moved ahead. But as a construction sector, as an infrastructure provider, we need to do a lot. So my suggestion, particularly on the third part, that how do we improve the planning? There should be, so I have seen the projects becoming from political, will-driven project to political exigency status. And that is where the planning paralysis comes into the play. And my suggestion is that how do we strengthen the planning side on the policy viewpoint? That is, some takeaway should come out from this forum. And as I said, the land acquisition side reform and the planning side reform, this will help us to plan our next 20 years of journey. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Three very interesting insights. Sorting out land issue, far more detailed planning. I also said it 3 times. And finally, the thought about examining the proposition for a regulator for the construction industry. Interesting thoughts, and I think when ET carries all these points together, they will also mention it, I'm sure, and there'll be interested quarters that will take note of it. So thank you very much. I have kept Colonel Parikshat Mehra for the end, and for very valid reasons. If you remember the speech, the opening speech of Lieutenant General Raghu Srinivasan this morning, the head of border roads, there were numerous times that he referred to you, sir, for your sterling work. He's a serving army officer on deputation to the government of Telangana on very specific aspects of infrastructure development. We know that Telangana is buzzing with a very, very strong political leadership. There's lots of action happening there. And on this panel, sir, I've kept you for the end so that you have the last word. Over to you, and we're very, very proud of you. Thank you.
Firstly, I'd like to thank ET now for having me here. I think it's become a regular thing with them now. It's probably the 3rd or the 4th time that I'm coming to forums like these, and you know, they're always so relevant. I thank the moderator for having made this easy for us, given us a framework to speak about. But when you're the last speaker, especially with the pearls of wisdom that you've already had from so many people, you hardly have anything new to contribute. But I'll still go ahead. I'll go ahead with the more nuts and bolts perspective of things. Firstly, about inviting investment is what we've discussing. I think the first step we need to invite good investment is to work a little more, a little better on our detailed project reports. I think the survey part, investigation and exploration campaigns have to be better, because only then shall we be able to conceive those projects better from both perspectives. One is the perspective of the rate of return that can be expected from that kind of a project, and other is the engineering point of view, so that we put in the right tools, the right methods, the right equipment to to ensure that we actualize what we've conceived. So I think that is important, that we need to really work on, because especially in the tunneling sector or in the road sector, I've witnessed so many projects go awry basically because the DPRs weren't good enough. The other thing is we need to have better contracts. Somebody brought out that the client and the contractor has to be on the same platform. Yes, because we're both equal stakeholders, and the only thing which can ensure that is a better contract. A better contract needs to ensure that there is risk mitigation measures inside. There is a framework for risk sharing, because the risk of the site or geology should always stay with the client. We just can't keep putting it across and lumping it on the contractor all the time. I think that is what our contracts need to do. The other thing is to have milestone-based payments so that we can ensure there is cash flow in the contracts, and our contracts don't go bad because there's not enough capital for the contractor or the applicator to put in. The other third, I think, bugbear is our dispute redressal mechanisms. Obviously, arbitration is never the right way. We have to now institute mechanisms for amicable settlement meetings. So ASMs need to come into our culture. It's going to be difficult because governments will have to go midway. I understand that there'll be issues of audit and things like that, but this culture needs to develop within the government setup as well. So that's one. Talking about government reforms, I'll be idealistic a bit, but I sincerely believe if there is no forest clearances, no land acquisition, there should not be a tender. Till the time we do not ensure that we have at least 90% of the land available for a project, we should not tender it out. Otherwise, everyone loses. That's one. The other thing is to actually have a pragmatic and a true online single window clearance framework. I can assure you, even as a government servant myself, if we have to take clearances for our projects, sometimes we even don't know whom to go to. So how do we expect somebody from the industry to get those clearances? So this we need to do as India. Somewhere we need to set these frameworks right, where somebody should be able to do it sitting online somewhere, put an application, and somebody should be able to, troubleshoot for them as to how will they get their permissions. So that's extremely important as a reform if we're looking for reforms today. The other thing that I've always believed in, and I think that's how border roads infrastructure has been coming up well, is to have long-term perspective plans. What happens is if we have visions for 20 years, which are definite visions for the projects to come up, what tends to happen is people invest more into those sectors because they know that there is a 20 to 25-year long-term perspective plan in play. And once you induct manpower, you induct people, you induct investments into a sector, say in a state like Arunachal, if you know that for the next 25, 30 years you have this work which will keep coming on, it becomes sustainable for everyone. So I think we need to, in all our sectors, have these long-term perspective plans in place. Then coming to the three learnings of my career has generally been with the Army and Border Roads Organization. Lately with the government of Telangana, I think three important facets that I believe are extremely important is, first is people matter. It's important that we develop teams. It's important that we groom them. It's important that we keep them together, we train them, and we identify such domain experts for infrastructure works and keep them together. It goes both for government and the industry alike. The other thing that we've learned is I think design for the worst. Today you see what's happened in Manali over the last about a month and a half. But I can assure you, please go to the approach road to Rohtang Tunnel, see the avalanche structures there. None of the structures has moved an inch. And when we were making them, a lot of people would question us as to why are we making these structures so heavy. But we knew that these areas have these kind of return periods for cloudbursts. So, that investment at that time today is reaping benefits because we'll not have to do them again. If we had optimized them too much, probably those structures would not be standing today. Rohtang Tunnel as such, nothing moved there. It's also gone through so many things. It has a 600 meters shear zone where there's leaking water, and there are so many things that I read on groups on LinkedIn that there is water seeping in. We in fact made 7 places for the water to seep in and go into the main drain so that there would not be hydrostatic pressure all around it. So these are the kind of things that we need to invest. We need to slightly put our effort on to make climate resilient structures. The other important thing is to have client side expertise. Projects will only go well if there is adequate technical expertise also available on the client side and the government side. If the representatives of the government do not have technical understanding, they will not be able to take good decisions. So we need to get the right people to monitor the projects based on their qualifications, and we need to train them if required. And also we need to delegate power at the functional level. For small things can't go to secretaries and ministers. We have to delegate. The secret of Border Roads Organization has been amazing amount of delegation that they've done over the years. When I was young, I could site a bridge, make its estimate, also give an administrative approval for that estimate of the bridge, and probably just my one-up who would be sitting 100 kilometers would sanction that bridge to be executed. So I think that's very important, delegating powers at the right level, at the functional levels. So those are my takeaways.
Thank you very much, and thank you for staying in time. You shouldn't say when I was young, because you're still very young. So, keep that for the next seminars 15 years from now. So, but thank you very much. Many learnings from you, but I think one of the biggest takeaways, things like land and clearances and DPRs have been mentioned, but I think you touched upon a point that has not seriously been discussed among infrastructure players, which is disaster resilient infrastructure. And that is increasingly coming up, not just in the Himalayan belt, but also with the flooding of cities and roads and highways, even in the plains, with earthquakes and various things. So disaster resilient infrastructure is a subject by itself, and I'm sure one day we will cover that in depth. But thank you very much. I am not actually going to delve further in terms of attempting to sum up, because lots of ideas have come from the panelists. Our time is also up, so I'm only just going to say that it has been an interesting panel, and thank each and every panelist for their contribution, and hand the proceedings back to the organizers. So thank you very much. I don't think we have time, because I have been given an indication that our time is up, so I'm sorry about this, but you can catch anybody informally now as we step off stage. So thank you very much. Sorry, the session stands closed.